Once a Spanish colony, the Western Sahara has become the infamous icon of colonialism in Africa. Now, annexed and ruled by neighboring Morocco, this runs against the international law, but most importantly, against the will of the Sahrawis, who have been waiting for their independence for more than 40 years. Promised, but never received.
Spain continues to be the sole administrator of the Sahara's territory. It's a territory still awaiting decolonization. In other words, Spain, which still remains as the colonizing country, has to meet the international obligations to decolonize, giving freedom to the people and the rightful ownership of their territory. That has yet to be done. The resolution of the Western Sahara's conflict is Spain's responsibility, and they must solve it, because they have abandoned thousands of people who were our compatriots.
The Western Sahara became part of the Spanish Empire in 1884. By 1960, the era of independence started to overtake the African continent with the declaration of the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples by the United Nations. However, by the early 1970s, Spain was reluctant to leave the Western Sahara, and by 1973, the Polisario Front was born to fight against Spain for the right of self-determination. The sovereignty dispute for the African territory took a new twist in 1975 in the so-called Green March. 300,000 civilians entered the Western Sahara to claim it as their own, following the orders of the King of Morocco.
This conflict started 38 years ago when the Moroccan army invaded Western Sahara after the agreement which was signed between Morocco and Mauritania and Spain to hand over the territory to those two countries. At the time when all the Sahrawis were expecting that the colonial power, which was at that time Spain, was preparing to hold a referendum for self-determination for the Sahrawi people. So when the invasion started, half of the population of the territory had to flee in order to seek security in neighboring countries, Algeria for instance. It is a decolonization conflict which Spain did not achieve, and so the Polisario Front, which was already fighting against the Spanish colonialism, had to shift its struggle against both Morocco and Mauritania. The armed struggle lasted 16 years, from 1975 to 1991. We had liberated almost 2/3 of the territory when the United Nations intervened and made a proposal to both parties, Morocco and Polisario, that it's time for peace and that we should stop fighting and that Morocco and Polisario will engage into negotiations which will lead to a free and fair referendum. Referendum was supposed to be immediately after the ceasefire in 1991, but it never happened because of the Moroccan intransigence. And the UN brought a mission called MINURSO to the territory to organize, supervise those supposed elections, and nothing happened for the last 22 years. So the conflict in its origin is an invasion against a non-self-governing territory, which is Western Sahara, inscribed in the agenda of the United Nations since 1963, and it still remained the same. The UN Fourth Committee on Decolonization is discussing the issue of Western Sahara as a non-achieved decolonization issue.
For decades, the Sahrawi people have been forced to live divided in three spaces: the Sahara occupied by Morocco, what they call the Sahara in freedom, and the refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria.
There are almost 200,000 people living here. You've already seen the place. We are in the Hamada. It is the most inhospitable place on the planet. The Sahrawis have spent 40 years here in spite of dozens of United Nations resolutions demanding a referendum, and there is still not a single country in the world that recognizes Western Sahara as part of Morocco. In addition, there are over 90 countries that recognize the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The Sahrawis' situation does not make sense because their country and its population have the support of a big percentage of the world's population, private and public organizations, as well as the UN resolutions with its international legality and human rights commitments.
The refugee camps are located in western Algeria. There are no commercial connections, so a charter flight takes you to the military airport of Tindouf in Algeria, from where the trip continues by road. During our visit, we traveled to Dakhla, one of the 4 districts or wilayas where the refugees live. Dakhla is a wilaya located furthest from Tindouf, closer to the frontier of Mauritania and the Western Sahara territories in control of the Polisario Front. There are about 40,000 people in Dakhla living in either rural houses or tents, locally known as haimas. How would you describe your life in the refugee camp?
Our life is very hard. It has been tough for many reasons, but one of the main ones is humanitarian aid. At the beginning, we received almost no aid and the living conditions were very difficult. Today, things have changed thanks to the humanitarian help and the international recognition we have received. We have embassies and diplomatic representations almost everywhere in the world. Now the world recognizes our rights to live.
Since 1970, the lifestyle of the Sahrawis changed dramatically. Once nomadic pastors and fishermen, they have been forced to survive throughout only humanitarian help. Their dependence on these external supplies not only include food donations, such as sugar, oil, lentils, pasta and barley, but also extend across their whole life.
The health centres of every wilaya receive basic medicines. They arrive at the central pharmacy and from there are distributed to all the refugee camps. We always need medicines. What we receive is not enough. For example, you can get a shipment of amoxicillin, but when there are an outbreak, there is never enough to treat all the ill people.
Can you tell me what are the main health problems in this area?
In October, for instance, as it is a month when the climate is changing, there is diarrhea and fever, which are caused by an increase in the number of flies. The main illnesses we have in the winter are breathing infections such as pneumonia and fever. In the summer, it is diarrhea caused by drinking unclean water, as well as people suffering either low or high blood pressure. Every day of the week, we have a monitoring system of the population in the communities. On Saturday, when we start the week, we do checkups for chronic diseases in the elderly who cannot come to the health centre, so we can visit them at their houses to check their blood pressure. Sundays are dedicated to children as part of the Child Health Integrated Programme. The programme consists of keeping a register of the health status of the children. Focus on the children's weight and size to find signs of any malnutrition in the community and treat it according to severity. In some cases, the malnutrition is severe.
These nurses running the health center in Dakhla are not the only professionals in the refugee camps. Lassen Sid Ahmed, who was born in Western Sahara and came to live here as a young adult, told me, in spite of their current living conditions, the Sahrawis in exile have made big educational achievements. What are your memories as a student before coming to live in the refugee camp?
I remember very well that I was studying in a Spanish school with many Spanish guys and few Sahrawis because Spanish schools, when we were a Spanish colony, didn't admit Sahrawi children. Just a few had the chance to study, so I remember that many of my friends couldn't come to school. That is something that has changed today because nowadays it is mandatory to study.
Can you explain me the education system the Sahrawis have in place?
Here, children go to primary school from the age of 6 until they are 12. Middle school is another 4 years, and then they go abroad, to one of the countries that have teaching agreements with us, to high school. We have students in Algeria, Cuba, Venezuela, and even in Spain, studying both at high school and for university degrees. The destination the children go to depends on the type of partnership and agreement we have signed with the country. We have students almost all around the world. Agreements with the different countries vary. Some help with humanitarian aid, some others offer us teaching partnerships. Those agreements have been signed with Arab countries but also with Europe. Thanks to those contracts, our teachers mostly get training in Algeria or Cuba. Later on, they come back and do their professional practices here, and that way we have teachers specialising in all subjects.
And what are the opportunities after university?
In addition to teachers, we have doctors in all the wilayas as well as technical engineers specialised in mechanics, electricity, etc. So when they are needed, we as a community can benefit from their training. There are, however, other professionals not working at the moment, and that is the case of soldiers, for example, because at the moment their expertise is not needed. We are big supporters of peace. Nobody likes war, especially in today's current situation where there is terrorism, torture, and we are all against that. We are looking for a peaceful solution to our conflict. We don't like war. The human rights role is important nowadays as the UN and the international community emphasises that to reach a long-lasting agreement, there is a need to respect freedom and dignity.
The Sahrawis' human rights situation is far from fair. In their day-to-day life, they have to endure the difficulties of not running water or electricity, and drinking water is precious. But one of the worst violations of their rights is the political ambiguity they still experience, which, in spite of decades of their struggle, most of the world is still unaware of. To help tackle this problem, the International Film Festival, known as Fit Sahara, started in 2003, aiming to bring attention to the Sahrawis' fight for self-determination.
In the fast-paced world we live in today, especially in the West, to exist you need to have image and voice. If you don't have a presence in the media, you don't exist in spite of your suffering or any abuse you're exposed to. So the film festival has served to give the Sahrawi people voice and image to explain their fight and the conflict that the Western Sahara has gone through with Morocco, a country that keeps the separation wall and Sahrawi families divided. In its 10 years, the festival has served to break the wall of silence imposed by the Western media on the Western Sahara issue.
Maria, can you tell me what's the origin of this festival?
This festival was born in 2003. So 10 years ago, and it's a shared dream by the Spanish filmmaking community and solidarity movement with the Sahrawi people and the Sahrawis themselves. And they decided to create a film festival here to bring not only film but other cultural activities and call attention to the plight of the Sahrawi people with the international community.
How did you get involved in this festival?
I came to the first festival in 2003 and I thought it was incredible. I mean, when the screen first lit up and it was a film about migrating birds and the birds took flight and all of a sudden we were overflying the oceans and the people's expressions and faces, and they still remember that first film. And I came to do the making of that year. And so I've always had it in my heart. Last year I conducted an evaluation of the project, and then they asked me to become executive director in order to, implement some of the changes that we wanted to make. One of the things we wanted to do is to make it more international, and I think we have. The festival's always had international presence, absolutely. South Africa has a big presence, for instance, and Algeria has a big presence, and Venezuela and Cuba and Spain, obviously. But this year we invited people from places like Egypt, Palestine, the United States. I mean, if I named every nationality here. And we also focused it more on human rights, film and human rights. So a lot of the activities we've been conducting have to do with film as a tool to denounce human rights violations and also to educate and to empower people. The 10th edition is dedicated to Sahrawi's most amazing fighters, and that's the women who built these camps and ran these camps for the first 16 years, practically with no men. The women who have preserved culture, the women who have continue to place enormous importance in women's empowerment, girls' empowerment.
FIS Sahara is the only film festival in the world that is held in refugee camps. This year, in its 10th edition, the program puts great focus on the defense of human rights and the use of video as a powerful tool to fight its violations. In addition to films, shorts and documentaries, the activities of the festival included conferences and workshops from international guests and organizations.
I'm in Sahara this year to represent Witness and to run the workshop on using video advocacy as a human rights tool. We feel that's a very important tool to use because there are often images that can happen at the right time, at the right place, and so if people are trained on how they can use video to capture issues of human rights violations, then it can be really important to document issues that can be used either in a court of law or to publicize what is happening, or even to put pressure for change to the right people. Because if you have the right audience and with the right message, you can get change in society. So I'm here as a witness representative just to help in the trainings and to give some of the little knowledge that I have also as a video activist.
How do you think the use of video for human rights can help Sahrawi women?
Use of video can play two roles for the Sahrawi women. I was very impressed to hear that the camps were first created by the women. So you find that in most societies, women play a very important role in creating the right environment where children grow, in the promotion of peace, in the promotion of human rights. So I think video can be used, one, as a tool of resilience. I think the stories of the Sahrawi women should be shared by other women in terms of how they have coped in such harsh conditions, one, and then two, maybe also to highlight their plight to the outside world, as in how can their situation be assisted, and then thirdly, if there are human rights violations, we hope that the use of video advocacy and the skills that they'll get from the trainings, they'll be able to make short documentaries or videos that can then be used outside. And I think it's a very important thing that the women in the camp are able to document some of the peculiar issues that affect women. For instance, women will be more concerned with access to food, the right to water, is there clean water in the camp, access to medication, access to health. When women are pregnant, the reproductive health, are they able to access the quality medical attention that they need here in the camp? So I think with the techniques that they'll get from also using video, they'll be able to articulate and communicate some of those issues which policymakers should be aware of, so that they can drive the right change that they need. Because I think part of what we'll teach them is how to target the right audience, how to craft your message, how to tell a good story. What story do they want to share? What story do FIS Sahara women want to share? And I think a woman with a camera is a very good resource.
Why did Amnesty International get involved in the FIS Sahara this year?
Because Amnesty International started some years ago an international film and debate festival in the Netherlands, because they believe in the power of image. Films open eyes. And now the festival is organized by Movies That Matter. Movies That Matter is an independent organization which organizes now the International Film and Debate Festival in the Netherlands. But we think for the Sahrawi people, it's very important that by film, by image, that they create awareness of their case. So that's why we are supporting now the FIS Sahara Festival, because this year, for the first time, they have a human rights component in their program, and they are organizing different workshops, to stimulate the knowledge and the skills of the Sahrawi activists. And I think that's a very important issue.
As an important addition to the festival, Sahrawi filmmakers participated with their film for the very first time. The group of young creatives are the first graduates from the Western Sahara Audiovisual School. A brainchild of the FIS Sahara, the school started in 2010 and has become an important element of the festival, enabling the Sahrawis to tell their own stories. Captivated by the Sahrawi's creation, the story on the big screen of the desert was received with applause and awe. But it was the documentary, digging out the truth, that moved every fiber of the Sahrawi community. The piece directed by Stisen Miranda, presented the excavations of mass graves where the bodies of Sahrawis killed to the separation wall were found.
The documentary is one of the best ways to reach all kind of public, because it is easier for people to watch a 27 minutes film or documentary rather than reading a 500 pages book or something like that. So it is a way of, as I say, reaching all kind of public people, young people, old people, and make those people know about what we have done and what we are going to do now. Those graves were the first ones we have found, and those 8 people were the first ones that we have identified. But there are more than 400 disappeared people who are missing still nowadays. It is very important because it is the first time that it's been proved all the human rights violation that has been done here in the Western Sahara by Morocco.
And what were the most shocking findings?
Well, they were, all of them, they were civilians, right? They were nomads, they were people like you and me, right? That they just went for water to give to their family during the Exodus process. And we found that they were assassinated for no reason. And one of the things we saw was they even had the money with them. And they even had the ID card. They had the national identity card with them, Spanish. They were Spanish because the Sahara was Spanish province, right? So it was, you know, it was so many feelings at the same time because we were so lucky that we were finding that, but at the same time we were so shocking the fact that, oh my God, they didn't even take the money of them. I mean, the only thing they did was assassinate them. So yeah, I think that all the personal things we found with them, like the rosary, the ID card, of course, this little glass for the tea, you know, that they drink with it, he had it with him. And we even found that with him. So the clothes, they were, well, we saw people. We didn't see just bones or remains. We saw persons. One of the testimonies explains in the documentary, it is the responsibility of the whole world and all international organizations, because it is a conflict going on for so many years, and it is time for them to get peace.
Are you taking the findings to the United Nations or any other international organization?
We've been in Geneva, in Europe as well, and Spain, obviously, because they were Spanish civilians. They know they have to do something. So the reaction is that, yeah, we have proofs. So something must be done. But I think they are going to do something. There is hope.
The case of Western Sahara has become the symbol of the inability of the international community to end a humanitarian crisis. The Sahrawis hope that the 40th anniversary of their fight for independence will also bring the end of their struggle.